One of the best things about The Sopranos is that it understands money the way real criminals understand money. Not as some clean number sitting in a bank account, and not as a simple reward for being dangerous, but as a living system. Money in this show moves through people. It leaks, it gets kicked up, it gets hidden, it gets spent to keep up appearances, it gets turned into status, and it gets turned into resentment. By the end of Season 2, that system is finally clear enough that you can start asking the question seriously: how much are these guys actually making? Not in the fake way where you just throw out huge numbers because they are mobsters and they wear suits, but in the real way, by looking at what each man actually does, what rackets feed him, where he sits in the hierarchy, and how much of that money is truly his once it stops moving and lands in his hands. That matters because the show is careful. It never gives you a neat business report. You never get some perfect accounting sheet telling you what Tony made from gambling in 1 quarter or what Paulie took from collections over 6 months. But what the show does give you is more useful. It gives you behavior. It gives you rank. It gives you fronts, scams, games, debts, kick-ups, and lifestyle. And that is enough to build a believable picture. So the cleanest way to answer the question is not to pretend we know exact totals. It is to ask what these men seem to be earning by the end of Season 2. What their yearly earning power looks like around that point, and what kind of personal wealth that likely creates for them. Once you do that, the money stops being random and starts becoming part of their character. Tony is obviously the place to start because by the end of Season 2, he is the clearest example of how mob wealth really works. Tony is not rich because he runs one giant racket better than everybody else. He is rich because he sits in the chair where all the other rackets meet. He has his own gambling interests, his own loans, his own pieces of scams, his own influence in sanitation and labor-related business, his own access to high-stakes card games, but the real difference is that Tony gets paid on top of other men's work. Paulie can grind all week. Pussy can run his things. Christopher can chase scores. Silvio can profit from the Bing and his connections. Tony still gets his share because the structure runs upward. That is the most important financial truth in the show. The boss does not just earn, the boss taxes the whole ecosystem. And Season 2 gives you several clear examples of what that means. The executive game is a major one. This is not a few old men playing for pocket change. These are wealthy, compulsive gamblers sitting down in a room where the house is built to make money from their weaknesses. The rake alone on a game like that can be serious. Then you have the Davy Scatino disaster, which is one of the best looks the show gives into how mob debt becomes profit. Tony does not simply lend money and ask for it back. He allows the debt to grow because he knows the real payday is not the debt itself, it is the bust-out. Merchandise gets pulled from the sporting goods store, credit gets destroyed, inventory gets turned into cash, and one weak man becomes a whole revenue stream until nothing is left. That is not regular income in the way bookmaking is regular income, but it shows you the scale Tony can operate on when opportunity arrives. Then there is the quieter money, the kind the show does not need to explain every 5 minutes because it is built into the world. Bookmaking, loans, tribute from soldiers and captains, a piece of construction and sanitation influence, protected businesses, random scores from theft and fraud that pass through his family. By the end of Season 2, Tony's real yearly earning power probably looks something like $800,000 to $1.5 million in a strong year, maybe a little more when the big games and bigger scores break his way. That estimate sounds large, but it fits the life. Tony lives in a big house, maintains a suburban upper-class image, supports a family, spends freely, gambles, eats constantly, keeps side women, pays for gifts, pays for appearances, and still behaves like a man who always needs more money coming in. That is exactly what you would expect from a mob boss at his level. Rich, absolutely. Secure in some permanent king-like way, not at all. And that second part is important because Tony's money is big, but it is never still. A lot of people imagine that being boss means sitting on mountains of untouched cash. The Sopranos shows something smarter. Tony's money is always being converted into lifestyle, obligation, and pressure. He has to look rich. He has to act rich. He has to help people. He has to cover problems. He has to keep the machine healthy. The more a man earns in that position, the more directions the money starts flying out of him. So Tony probably has the highest gross earning power in Jersey by a mile, but the money is always in motion. That is why he feels powerful and trapped at the same time. Junior is the opposite kind of case, and that is what makes him interesting. If you judged by title alone, you might assume Junior should be close to Tony financially. He is old school, he has status, he has history, and at one point he had the kind of neighborhood-based control that could make a man very comfortable. His money would have come from traditional streams, bookmaking, loans, local influence, long-standing envelopes from people under him, and the kind of arrangements that older captains build over decades. But by the end of Season 2, Junior is no longer a man expanding his world. He is a man trying not to lose more of it. Age, legal trouble, physical limitation, and reduced practical control all cut into his ability to earn in the present. This is where people usually misunderstand mob money. They think a man who once had power automatically stays rich in the same active way forever. But that world rewards motion. If you cannot press your advantage, supervise your guys, collect aggressively, and keep fear alive around your name, your earning power shrinks even if your reputation stays on paper. Junior still has some money coming in by the end of Season 2. He is not broke. He still has enough rank and enough old connections that he probably receives a steady trickle from old arrangements. But his live earning power feels much lower than Tony's. It probably sits somewhere around $150,000 to $300,000 a year at that point, with the more important truth being that Junior's wealth is likely stored wealth rather than flowing wealth. He feels like a man living partly off what he built years earlier, not a man who is suddenly exploding into new money now. That suits his whole character. Junior's story in Season 2 is about a man who still matters but no longer controls the future. Silvio is one of the smartest financial portraits in the entire show because he makes money the way cautious, capable criminals want to make money. He has a real-looking business in the Bing. He has status near the top, and he does not have the restless, self-destructive appetite that ruins so many others. The Bing matters more than people sometimes think. It is not just a set. It is a cash-heavy business in a world where cash-heavy businesses are incredibly useful. Drinks, private rooms, dancers, side deals, meetings, quiet payments. The whole place works as both income source and criminal infrastructure. A club like that is valuable even before you get into the indirect benefits, because once you own a place like that, money has a reason to be around you all the time. Then you add the second half of Silvio's value, which is trust. He is close to Tony, and that is worth money on its own. Being the man near the boss means better information, better opportunities, better timing, and better protection. Silvio does not have to chase every dollar in the reckless way Christopher does, because his position gives him access to more stable streams. By the end of Season 2, Silvio's yearly earning power likely lands somewhere around $300,000 to $500,000. That range makes sense because he looks comfortable without looking absurdly rich. He looks like a man whose money is settled. That is the key word with Silvio. Settled. It is not just that he earns well, it is that his money feels healthier than most of the others. Less panic in it, less ego in it, less chaos in it. Paulie is what a working soldier looks like when he survives long enough to become truly useful. His money is not built around one glorious operation. It is built around constant pressure and constant activity. Bookmaking, collections, intimidation, little scams, middleman cuts, shaking value out of his street presence, taking his piece anywhere his name and his threat can create one. Paulie is a grinder. He is always around, always involved, always squeezing money out of the world in small to medium ways. That is why his income feels believable. He is not the kind of guy who invents the future. He is the kind of guy who keeps the old ways profitable. By the end of Season 2, Paulie probably earns around $200,000 to $350,000 a year, maybe nudging higher when a good run comes together. That fits everything about him. He dresses well, he eats well, he clearly has money, he clearly is not struggling, but he does not live like the man on top. And the interesting thing with Paulie is that a larger share of his money may feel like his actual money. He does not have Tony's big suburban household to support. He does not have the same image costs. He can spend on himself, hide money for himself, and feel more directly connected to what he earns. In pure yearly terms, he is nowhere near Tony, but in terms of how usable his money feels day to day, he may be in a stronger position than some people realize. Pussy lives in a similar financial lane, but the emotional meaning of his money is completely different. In practical terms, Pussy should be one of the stronger earners in Jersey by the end of Season 2. He has been around a long time. He has his auto body shop as a front. He has long-standing trust, at least on the surface for most of the season. He has access to the same classic mob income sources: gambling, theft, side deals, collections, whatever operations a veteran man in his position would be connected to. He feels like the kind of guy who should be bringing in roughly $250,000 to $400,000 a year around that time, maybe more in better stretches. But Pussy's money tells a darker story because almost none of it feels free anymore. That is the genius of his character. On paper, he still looks like a serious earner. In reality, the money is poisoned because his entire life is poisoned. Every dollar is sitting next to fear, guilt, pressure from the FBI, and the slow collapse of his place in Tony's world. So, when you talk about how much Pussy makes, the number matters less than the fact that he can no longer enjoy the life that number is supposed to buy. That is one of the show's most brutal financial truths. Money has no value once you are too compromised to feel safe inside it. Christopher is where the question becomes especially interesting, because by the end of season 2, he is rich enough to feel powerful, but not rich enough to be what he imagines himself becoming. That gap defines almost everything about him. Christopher's money comes from the usual lower to mid-level mob mix: hijacking, sports betting, collections, pieces of scams, fast opportunities handed to him through Tony's favor, and whatever else he is allowed to touch as he rises. The key thing with Christopher is that his income is real, but it is not yet stable in the way Olderman's income is stable. He is still building. He is still proving himself. He is still too emotional and too impulsive to fully convert opportunity into secure long-term wealth. That is why Christopher probably sits around $100,000 to $250,000 a year by the end of season 2. That might sound lower than his swagger suggests, but that is exactly the point. Christopher lives above his financial emotional maturity. He spends like a man who is already a prince, but he is still a guy being pulled upward by Tony's favor rather than a man who truly controls an empire of his own. He is rich compared to ordinary people, absolutely. He has access to cars, clothes, nightlife, status, and the feeling of being important. But inside his own world, he is still not one of the major pillars. That tension is what gives Christopher so much heat. He can see the top, he can almost taste it. But by the end of season 2, he is still mostly living on potential, not ownership. Furio is a special case because his actual time in Jersey by the end of season 2 is shorter, but the show makes his function crystal clear. Furio is valuable because he is reliable, disciplined, feared, and useful. He is not yet built into the Jersey economy the way Paulie or Pussy are, but he is immediately placed in spots where money naturally flows. Collections, enforcement, sensitive work for Tony. The kind of personal assignments where trust matters more than charm. Furio's value to Tony is that he turns force into clean results, and in that world, a boss will always pay for that. So, if you imagine Furio's earning power around that moment, it is probably around $100,000 to $200,000 on a yearly basis, perhaps a bit lower if you are being strict about how recently he arrived, but clearly on a rising track. The number itself matters less than the shape of it. Furio is not yet broad in how he earns, but he is strong in how he earns. He has the kind of reputation that tends to create future money fast. Once a man is known as dependable and effective, bosses want him closer, and closeness to a boss becomes money sooner or later. Richie is one of the most revealing characters to examine financially because he shows how badly pride can distort a man's sense of what he is actually worth. Richie comes out of prison carrying the emotional memory of an older order. In his head, he is still a serious man who deserves territory, respect, and the income that should come with both. But by the end of season 2, Richie's actual earning base is nowhere near as secure as his self-image. He likely has some loans out, some collections, some old contacts, some street-level income, and maybe some access to small pieces of business through men who still fear or respect him. But he is not walking into a world built for him anymore. He is walking into Tony's structure, and that changes everything. That is why Richie's practical earning power probably lands around $100,000 to $200,000 by the end of season 2. Maybe a bit more on paper in a particularly strong run, but not the kind of commanding wealth his attitude suggests. And that mismatch is central to his character. Richie does not just feel disrespected emotionally, he feels financially downgraded. He believes the world owes him a richer comeback than he is getting, and that humiliation feeds the rest of his behavior. In The Sopranos, insult and money are almost always tied together. Men do not only want respect for its own sake, they want the money and control that prove the respect is real. Hesh sits a little outside the direct Jersey ladder, but he is too important financially to ignore. Hesh represents another kind of mob-adjacent wealth, older, quieter, more intelligent, and in some ways more durable. He is not grinding bookmaking slips like Paulie. He is not carrying a crew like Tony. He is not trying to claw his way upward like Christopher. Hesh's money comes from lending, long relationships, old business instincts, and staying near organized crime without drowning in the daily noise of it. He feels like a man who has turned proximity to danger into a long-term advantage. That makes Hesh hard to measure by yearly street earning power alone, because his wealth probably works more like accumulated personal fortune plus strategic income rather than weekly mob envelopes in the usual sense. But if you are asking who might actually be one of the wealthiest men around Tony by the end of season 2 in terms of stored, secure value, Hesh has to be near the top. He may not look like the boss, but his money feels older and calmer than most of theirs, and that is not a small difference. In a world full of men whose money is always mixed with appetite and crisis, Hesh's wealth feels like it might actually survive. Once you look at all of them together, the picture becomes much clearer. Tony is the top earner because he profits from the structure itself. His money probably lives in that $800,000 to $1.5 million range in yearly earning power, because he gets his own rackets plus a piece of everyone else's. Silvio likely sits in the next stable tier, around 300,000 to 500,000 because he has the Bing and trusted proximity to power. Paulie and Pussy feel like strong middle-upper earners, somewhere around 200,000 to 400,000 depending on the year and the luck of the scores. Junior still has money, but his active earning power is fading, probably around 150,000 to 300,000. Christopher is climbing and flush enough to feel big, but probably still only around 100,000 to 250,000 in realistic yearly terms. Furio is in a similar range but with less history in Jersey and a clearer upward future. Richie probably falls into that zone too, except with far more ego than financial stability. Hesh is the exception. A man whose current yearly flow may be less easy to pin down, but whose overall wealth may quietly beat several of them. But the reason this question is worth asking is not because the numbers are fun on their own, it is because the money tells you who these people are. Tony's income is huge because his burden is huge. Junior's income is fading because his world is fading. Silvio's money is stable because he is stable. Paulie's money is pieced together because his whole life is pieced together through hustle and survival. Christopher's money is not enough for his ego because his ego is years ahead of his actual position. Richie's money feels insulting to him because he still lives in the past. Pussy's money is cursed because he is cursed. Furio's money is growing because he is useful. Hesh's money is durable because he built it with more distance and more patience. That is what makes The Sopranos better than most crime shows. It does not just show men with cash, it shows men being shaped by the way they earn that cash. By the end of season 2, you can already see the full system. The boss lives off tribute and scale. The veteran soldiers live off routine and fear. The younger guy lives off access and ambition. The fading old man lives off memory. The businessman on the edge of it all lives off wisdom and distance. Once you see that, the money becomes one of the clearest ways to understand the whole show. So the most honest answer is not a single neat list of made-up exact totals. It is this. By the end of season 2, Tony is rich because the whole machine runs through him. Silvio is comfortable because he is positioned perfectly. Paulie and Pussy are strong earners because they know how to grind the street into a living. Junior still has money, but most of his power now belongs to the past. Christopher has enough to taste importance, but not enough to be secure in it. Furio is still building, but his value is already obvious. Richie wants the money of an old king while living the reality of a man who has to rebuild. And Hesh may quietly understand money better than almost all of them. That is how much they made by the end of season 2. Not in the fake exact way, but in the only way that fits The Sopranos. Through rank, through rackets, through fear, through debt, through cash businesses, through kick-ups, and through the endless difference between looking rich and actually being safe.